So let's shift gears and now talk about the letter, because there's so many different facets and angles that we could have this conversation about the letter from Bakari Sellers and the 60 Democratic, African-American Democratic elected officials. What did you find, and take it from there?
So, you know, you've read the letter. I actually haven't had a chance to see it yet. I've been trying to, but it's been difficult. But from what I understand, just from what's been reported about that letter, I actually was not aware of the BDS portion of it. But the whole point of it is that Cornell West, okay, so Bernie Sanders appointed Cornell West, and like you said, he's a very vocal proponent of BDS and a very vocal proponent of Palestinian rights. Mm-hmm. And so he has taken that into the platform hearings. And so what you've had is you've had these very public hearings with, you know, people who are very, you know, powerful, influential, you know, establishment Democrats, mm-hmm. having to listen to someone like Cornell West say things that they're not used to having to listen to.
Absolutely.
And, you know, he's been confronting them in a ways that this, in my lifetime, I should say, I've never, ever seen people who are this high level, you know, in the Democratic Party be confronted with the kinds of things that Cornel West is saying outside of a protest.
Right.
So you know, there's been video. Obviously, this has been airing live in places like C-SPAN. And so video footage of this has really gone viral. And people are just like, you know, it's actually kind of exhilarating to watch. It's like it's political theater in a lot of ways, you know? And so this has been making the rounds. It's gone viral and people are watching. And, you know, some people who are very pro Bernie Sanders who maybe didn't really understand the dynamics or even really know about Israel Palestine are watching this and recognizing, okay, like this is an issue of oppression, right? Mm-hmm. Like maybe something that they didn't know before. And so that is scary for the Democratic Party, especially the Hillary Clinton wing of the Democratic Party. Because, you know, this is what's happening. I mean, there's a trend where polls have been showing that liberal Democrats are increasingly supportive of Palestinian rights, to the point where the most recent poll shows that liberal Democrats, particularly those voting for Bernie Sanders, actually support Palestinians more than they do Israelis, which is like completely unprecedented.
Wow.
And so this is basically the progressive base of the Democratic Party is changing on this issue dramatically and very, very fast. That number of liberals who support Palestinians has doubled in the last 2 years. And so what you have is that sentiment it's inching its way up. And that's what you see in Cornel West being appointed and being able to say this at the Democratic platform hearing, as you see the grassroots really inching its way up on what, you know, is in a lot of ways the third rail of American politics. This is the one issue that you're just not allowed to talk about. And so that's why this letter took place, because Cornel West is also, you know, he's basically a celebrity civil rights activist and scholar and author and Black radical. And, you know, despite his qualms with Obama, you know, he's still considered somebody who's admired in the Black community. Mm-hmm. And so when you have the letter, you know, when you have a letter like the one that Bakari spearheaded or wrote being signed by all these people, the message is that don't listen to Cornel West. Don't listen to that Black guy. Listen to these Black leaders. And so that was an attempt to really like undercut the effectiveness of Cornel West's testimony at these hearings.
Yeah, that was my gut reaction. And that's still where I fall on the spectrum. And Bakari knows that I completely disagree with with this image of 60 Black elected officials, almost as though it's a voice of the Black community. And whether that was intentional or not, that's really how it can be played. So much so that if now Bernie Sanders or Zogby or well, not even Cornel West, but just say someone who's not African American speaks out against it, it can be spun like a swift boat. It can just be spun in a racial narrative, the same games that we've been playing for a very long time in this election.
This is a pattern. Right, so this is a pattern that has emerged this election beyond Israel-Palestine. I mean, this is something that we've been seeing where Hillary Clinton surrogates are almost always, I mean, we've talked about this on this show before, but it's almost always, you know, either minorities or women being put forth to oppose leftist policies. And then that way, like you said, you can sort of put it in this racial lens of, oh, like the leaders of this community, of this minority community or this minority community support this. So as like a white people, we can't, or as anybody, you know, we can't. That's the voice of that community. And we've seen it particularly with Black elected officials. I mean, you had John Lewis when the
Yeah.
Congressional Black Caucus endorsed Hillary, calling
Yeah.
into question Bernie Sanders' civil rights record. Then you had, I think it was Clyburn,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
trying to say that free college was something that
No
was going to be bad
handouts.
for historically Black colleges, right?
Exactly.
Which is like totally something that I can't imagine him saying outside of this election process. And then you also have it recently where you have the CBC leadership writing a letter opposing
Yep.
removing superdelegates from the Democratic primary process.
Yep.
And so you've seen this, like the Hillary Clinton campaign has really been trying to use these various ways that they're trying to leverage her support among Black and brown communities. And it's happened with like Latino communities too. I mean, when Jane Sanders went to go visit the tent city in Maricopa County in Arizona, and Sheriff Joe Arpaio showed up, you had Louis Gutierrez holding or sending a letter to like the media, claiming that she got a tour from Arpaio and that the Bernie Sanders campaign was allied with Joe Arpaio. Like it's really, actually, I find really, really offensive and insulting that this is what this has come to on the Democratic side of this primary, is with one side really trying to leverage her support among minority voters to try and put everything in a racial lens, so that it's just this really divisive. If you support changing the Democratic platform language on Israel, maybe that can be construed as racist because you're opposing the will of Black leaders. Like that's, the logical outcome of that, with the way that this election process has been going.
And the best, and what I want to do is I just kind of want to, I'm going to speak on Bakari's behalf right now and say it's perhaps, perhaps these 60 people, perhaps Bakari and the rest of the people who signed onto this letter simply agree with the original language, and they, for whatever reason, they believe in that original language, and they would say that the Black community is not monolithic. And just like we have Cornell West, who is a fierce defender and advocate for Palestine, you also have African Americans in America who are fierce advocates for Israel, and they fall on that side of the equation. I'm sure that's going to be one of the things that he says. And so what would you say to that, number one? And then I have a couple things that I would say to my own proposition there. Go ahead.
Well, of course, yeah, the Black community, no community in this country is monolithic, as much as, the media portrays it that way. So of course, there are elements of the Black community that support Israel, elements that support Palestine, elements that don't really care. And that's probably the case for most communities. I think that there is some power when it comes to, there's an extra added layer of power to the issue of Israel-Palestine when you have Black civil rights leaders speaking on it, right? Because especially on the issue of Palestine, because Black Lives Matter, for example, has been very much like allied with the issue of Palestine, and there's been delegations going to visit there, and they do see this very much in the lens of civil rights, and that's what it is at the end of the day. It's civil rights. You have people that are being denied basic rights, and that's how people like Cornell West see it. I mean, that's the reality on the ground. And so the fact that they were trying to specifically undercut Cornell West, I mean, there wasn't, that's what this was about.
Yeah.
There wasn't, it's not like, and you could have undercut Cornell West in other ways. Instead of having like Jewish groups, having Jewish groups write a letter, it was specifically Black lawmakers writing a letter. And so it was just like trying to pit, I feel like, identity against identity, to try and say, no, we're the representatives, like to tell the Clinton people on the Democratic Platform Committee, no, we are the representative of the Black community, not Cornell West. Listen to us.
I mean, historically, that's always been the case, a competition between who's going to be the voice of the Black community. And there is no singular voice of the Black community. Cornel West himself is clearly not the voice of the Black community. But oftentimes what happens, and I know you've experienced this firsthand, is if there's a countervailing force, voice, that's saying something that's counter to the approved narrative, those voices will be erased. Right. And so there was a need, in my opinion, and Bakari will speak for himself, but in my opinion, there was a need to present a counter voice to Cornel West, because they couldn't erase Cornel West. Like they can so easily erase all of our minor voices out here who don't have those significant platforms. They could just erase the fact that there are plenty of women who don't support Hillary Clinton's platform or Hillary Clinton, plenty of African Americans who stand in complete solidarity with Palestine, right? They want to completely erase that portion and give a representation that it is the black community, and the black community stands with Hillary Clinton, and the black community stands with Israel, when in actuality, there is a rich legacy that goes so far back, generations of African Americans standing, not generations, but decades of African Americans standing with the Palestinian people. So, you know, it's a very frustrating situation, in my opinion, because it feels like it's one more domino in that chain of narratives that have been spun for against Bernie Sanders, and more than Bernie Sanders, but what he stands for. And in this case, a very progressive position on Palestine. And
the most, I would say, the most progressive position in all of the Senate. Definitely the most. I mean, what he's done is pretty historic. Like, no one's ever gone this far on this high of a platform, again, at least in my lifetime. You know, especially someone like Bernie Sanders, of all people, who 2 years ago was like shouting down hecklers who were people who were heckling him about the issue of Gaza. He was like telling them to shut up. And the where he's gone from there for, you know, in just a short time span is incredible. And he's taken it to the point where on a national stage, of a debate stage, a national debate stage during a presidential election, as a candidate, a competitive candidate, you know, challenge the orthodoxy on the most taboo issue when it comes to American politics.
And that's for me, that is the most telling thing, that it is taboo. It is that third rail. You can't talk about it. If you talk about it and not talk about it from the the ordained narrative, then you are isolated, and everything is done possible to erase your voice or marginalize your voice. So Rania, listen, thanks so much for coming on. We kind of went into it a little bit, but we'll go into it a lot deeper. I know Bakari has already agreed to it, and you've agreed to it. So just again, to have a conversation on not only this letter, but the underlying issues underneath it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And thanks so much again for having me on. It's always fun to come on and chat.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.